Hello and welcome back to Gapeys Garden. It's time for our annual Volunteers in the Garden video. So every year I like to show you what's come up in the garden that I didn't actually plant. So it could have come from something I grew in that area last year that went to seed, or a lot of times it comes in the compost that maybe didn't get hot enough to kill all the seeds. So let's take a look and see what's growing in the garden this year from stuff I didn't plant. We had quite a few buckwheat that came up that overseeded last year. We have a white variety and also a pink one, but I think the pink one I've already pulled out. They were getting quite large, so this is one of the last ones that I still have growing in this bed. As usual, we have a few volunteer cherry tomatoes. This one is growing next to the chicken run, and I'm not sure what variety it is. It's got some yellow cherry tomatoes, which I've not grown very many yellow varieties of cherry tomatoes before, so I'm thinking it could either be the Gold Nugget or maybe Champagne Bubbles. Those were grown a few years ago and must have come in the compost. I have two other volunteer cherry tomatoes, and I'm not sure what these are because they haven't ripened yet, but this one here is growing right by the Giraffe Tools hose reel, and it's obviously a cherry tomato, but what color it will be is to be determined. Now the last one is growing here in the wood chip pathway just outside of this raised bed, and this is another cherry tomatoes that looks just like the last one, so that could be the same variety, but we'll have to wait and see what it ripens to. One thing we always get volunteers of every year, and I haven't had to grow these from seed in several years, is chamomile. And this one actually was growing in the path here, and I decided to pull it out and repot it or replant it in our bed over here. So it's doing really well. We've got a patch there, and then we've got another patch here. It actually mixes in really well with the alyssum that I grew from seed this year. This is one of my favorite nasturtiums. This is called Gleam Salmon, and I grew this in the raspberry bed here a couple years ago, and it's been coming back every year by reseeding itself. So it puts out a ton of seeds that just come back every year. Now the bees' favorite volunteer is borage. We've got a ton of borage in this little patch over here, and the bumblebees and the honeybees really like it. You can see one making its way around the blossoms here. It's starting to get a little bit dark, so not as many bees as there is earlier in the day. Now, this is one of the larger volunteers. This is a kaleidoscope kale that went to seed, I believe it was last fall. And we had a whole bunch of sprouts come up in this bed, but I decided to pull them all out except for this one. And it's been doing really, really well. We had one sweet pea come up in this bed that is next to one of the fig trees. And this one is called High Scent. I grew this one in the bed over there where the asparagus is growing. So I'm not sure exactly how it got way over here, but somehow it did. But this is one of my favorite sweet peas. And here's a volunteer spinach that must have reseeded from some overwintered spinach. It's probably gonna hopefully survive this winter, and maybe we'll get a little bit of a harvest off of this throughout the winter. We have this volunteer squash that's either a delicata or a butternut. It's hard to say because there's really not any fruit on it yet. There's tons and tons of flowers, but they're all looking like male flowers. It looks like we do have one single fruit in there, and it does look a little more butternut shaped, so that might be what it is. I just noticed we've got some yarrow growing here in the beans, and yarrow is like a weed because it just comes up everywhere, so I'm actually not going to let this one grow. I'm going to pull that out because I don't want yarrow growing all over the place. On the corner of this raised bed we have a volunteer Cosmo, and I'm really glad I didn't pull this out because it is really beautiful. I think this variety is called Velouette, and I grew that one last year. And I think we have the same variety of Cosmo growing here in our new bed that we filled with some compost. And it looks very similar. It's a little more pink than white, but very similar. So I think that's what this one is too. This one has a lot more pink. Really pretty. Another volunteer we have coming up in this bed of alyssums is California poppies. So I know these migrated probably from the compost, but we had some of these grow in one of our in-ground beds, and it seems to have made its way over here. We have this dragonfire strawflower that volunteered here next to the tomatoes. I did grow a bunch of strawflowers in this bed last year, and we had one that came back, which is a nice surprise. We've got some dill volunteering in the greenhouse, and it's already flowered and is going to seed. The seeds are almost ready to harvest, actually. Here in the corn patch, I always grow potatoes and corn next to each other every year and usually rotate which side of the bed I grow them on. Well, last year I grew potatoes on this side, and it's not a surprise that we had a few volunteers pop up. So I decided to just leave those in the ground. So we've probably got at least 5 potatoes growing up out of here. We also have some cilantro that is growing in the corn and potato bed, and it's actually going to seed. So we've got some flowers there, and we've already got some coriander seeds coming out there. We've got a little pollinator there, but we've got a few of those hiding in this bed. Decided to harvest one of my volunteer potatoes, and we got some pretty nice looking spuds. This doesn't look like any of the varieties that I bought last year to grow, so I think this might be the true potato seed or TPS potato that I grew last year. So it's kind of a long, almost huge fingerling type. We have a volunteer potato over here, and I thought I would show you the harvest, and let's see what we got. So I grew, I think, 3 different varieties of potatoes here in this bed last year, and it looks like we've got a red one. So I'll have to see what red potatoes we grew last year. I think, actually I don't remember growing a red potato last year. I'll have to double check on that, but it looks like we've got quite a few red potatoes here. Pretty good sized ones. That should make a few good meals. I might leave some in the ground to volunteer again next year. Ooh, here's a really nice one. Another monster. I should let potatoes volunteer more often. I hope you enjoyed this tour of the volunteers in the garden this year, and I'm going to enjoy these potatoes. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.